Hey, Theologic listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. This is going to be actually a review episode and not necessarily a topical episode like we usually do, so I hope you find it fruitful and enjoy it. We're actually going to be reviewing our podcast time at the G3 conference in Atlanta, Georgia. I look forward to sharing my own thoughts, but particularly these guys' thoughts as well, as it's nice to always get feedback and perspective from other people that were there. And if you've never heard of the G3 conference, I strongly encourage you to look up their YouTube channel and their website. I think they have an app. Good stuff, good content. Anyway, we're going to start off our episode like we do every other Theologic episode with an impactful passage that Stephen Lawson spoke on it, right? We said that? So Stephen Lawson gave a bomb sermon on sovereignty of God out of Psalm 93. So this is God's word out of Psalm 93. Yahweh reigns. He is clothed with majesty. Yahweh has clothed and girded himself with strength. Indeed, the world is established. It will not be shaken. Your throne is established from of old. You are from everlasting. The rivers have lifted up, O Yahweh. The rivers have lifted up their voice. The rivers lift up their pounding waves more than the voices of many waters, than the mighty breakers of the sea. Yahweh on high is mighty. That's Psalm 93. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Zach Deacon.
I'm Zach Packey.
Sean Weston.
An episode on the G3 conference. I know that I've got pages and pages of notes. Just sitting there under biblical preaching is just a privilege. Not only being there for that, but being there with these other gentlemen. It was just a blast. I know it's the second time the three of us have gone. The fourth time that Sean and I have actually been there, and so it's just a great conference.
The first time we've gone as starting our endeavor here, starting our podcast.
Yeah. So you guys maybe don't know. I think we've shared a little bit, but our podcast got its start. It's Genesis, if we want to say that, from
2 years ago.
Yeah, from 2 years ago at the G3 conference.
Yeah.
And so one thing I just want to just throw out there for our listener is, if you don't know what G3 is, like maybe it's the first time you've ever heard of that conference, heard of that ministry. It's a ministry out of Georgia, and it's one that I would echo what Deacon just said, that is definitely worth checking out online, whether it's through the app, going to the YouTube page, or just going straight to their website. Yeah. But they have a lot of good content for the Christian life, encouraging sermons. They have their own podcast. But also resources for churches. Yeah. And so it's a very good ministry to be familiar with in general, whether or not you ever go to the conference. Just being aware of that ministry and checking out its online presence and what resources it has for individuals as well as churches would be wise. But nonetheless, we are grateful that they do this conference every 2 years. Yeah. It is always refreshing. And to go as a group is good fun, just being able to hang out and have fellowship, dialogue about what we've been learning, and to be able to just eat, meet other people, check out some books, and enjoy just really good preaching.
And grow in brotherhood together. That's what I've appreciated, our time together. Just being able to spend time together, and you get to know each other in ways that you wouldn't just by hanging out in the middle in the time of Iowa here. So
it's always been a really well put together conference. Always very well attended, very clean, very organized, I thought. Just an overall very well put together atmosphere, I would say. Bookstore's great. Love that.
So the structure of the conference, it started with the pre-conference. We got to go to that. Right. And that subject was on Christian nationalism and what that exactly is. What's currently going on within the stream of the idea of Christian nationalism. Then the next day began the real conference. 8,000 plus people showed up.
About 8,400.
8,400, about 8,400 people showed up.
Singing A Mighty Fortress is Our God with that many people is a good experience. Is a good experience.
It's almost worth it for the singing alone.
I
mean, I love singing that music together. It's by far my favorite part.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. In the middle of it, you have obviously the general sessions with most people. You had breakout sessions where you can go visit, listen to some speakers like Justin Peters and guys that perhaps you've heard of before. And they had some for the ladies too. Did you see the ladies ones?
Yeah. Well, I didn't get to see them.
I walked by them and I see like ladies are streaming into those rooms. It's like there's standing room only, and maybe not even that for sessions with James Coates' wife Erin and Scott Aniel's wife Becky. So they had a lot of room for them there. It was really good.
I was very thankful for the amount of families that I saw there. Yes. There were a lot of kids there.
Yeah, that's actually something I was thinking about. I was getting ready for this episode. Was that like this is not like we're three guys. Two of us are pastors. Yeah, and I do not want the impression of this conference to be that this is for men. Yes. This is for pastors. As a matter of fact. If you're looking for I don't know how to necessarily say this, but like a Christian themed or Christ-centered vacation, and I think all vacations should be Christ-centered. Sure. But in the sense of like going after teaching or spending some time as a family at a conference or camp or something like that, I would recommend taking your family to this. Like there were families everywhere. As a matter of fact, I caught myself so many times missing my three daughters as I was there watching dads hold their kids and just all sorts of family activities going on. And like I was aware of the ladies' meeting that Packy was talking about. I didn't see the crowd he mentioned, but even stuff like that where I wish Hannah could have been there to go along to that. Yeah. So I just wanted to be clear that this is very much a family conference and a very diverse conference. Something I was telling my wife about is in the past 3 trips I've had there, I've always thought, well, there's some diversity here. You've got some people that are rather conservative. You've got some kind of younger folks. I mean, it's just a wide range. But then this year I step in there and there are, without going into all detail and like drowning this episode, I would honestly just put it this way. And I don't mean this in a negative sense, but like some people in there that's like, by looking at you in my limited mind, like, are you even a Christian? Kind of like, you get what I'm saying? Like looking at them like, you don't look like the other Christians here. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but just trying to be in short and be clear. Yeah. So there were many colors, and by many colors, not like limiting culture to each color, but when you saw people of these different colors, you could tell by how they were dressed, how they're carrying themselves, that there was even different cultures represented with each color. Like it was just a crazy, diverse group. So we may be 3 white guys from the Midwest holding conservative ideals going to this, but believe you me, there were a lot of other kinds of people there at this conference, all worshiping God in hymns and enjoying some really good, solid teaching.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like a slice of heaven in a sense?
That was exactly what I thought while we were in there. I was like, dude, like singing, especially when we're singing together, because like Hannah and I are reading Revelation right now. We just read 4 and 5 yesterday. And just being reminded of the tribes, the tongues, the language, the people groups that are there before the throne. Yeah, as we were in that hall full of 8,000 plus people of different colors, different clothing, different culture, I was like, this is a small taste of heaven.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So, of course, we talked about the book story, the exhibit halls. Some of the speakers that were there, we had Steve Lawson, as Zach mentioned, Mike Riccardi. Go ahead.
What was a favorite? So, I mean, like, when it comes to like the speakers and stuff, what was like, if you were to tell the audience right now, okay, they're launching the videos onto their YouTube channel. Here's one you've got to go listen to. So, Pack, you were talking with the speakers. Who are you going to be telling them to go listen to?
I would definitely point to Steve Lawson's message from the text that Zach read, Psalm 93. He just hammered at even just those first 3 words, Yahweh reigns, Yahweh reigns, Yahweh reigns. And that in those 3 words demonstrates such a profundity of the extent of God's control. We'll talk about that. I could talk about that in a little bit, but that message was very, very helpful. Not giving you a huge chunk of scripture, although it's the preach of the entire psalm, but those 3 words even were just so profound that he expounded on for us. What do you think, Deacon?
I mean, I would go. I mean, it's a close race for the finish line between, I would say, Lawson's message and Bauckham, but I would say, in no particular order, you have to listen to that Psalm 93 sermon by Lawson. You got to listen to Bauckham, and coming out of nowhere, because I just simply didn't know who him was, Riccardi, Mike Riccardi, his sermon on the atonement, God's sovereignty in the atonement. I think it's one of the best sermons I've ever heard on the atonement. Yeah. And so just out of sheer lacking in maybe a knowledge of the topic, I'd go listen to that one first. But any of those, in no particular order, I would make sure that I saw.
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement with Lawson. So all three of us here are stating, Lawson, you got to check it out. So we'll be sure to get that either linked into this episode, or I'll post it to the Facebook page, or maybe we'll do both.
Yep.
But you mentioned Bauckham as kind of a close follow-up, and Riccardi. Yep. So Packy, who's your number two?
My number two, probably Paul Washer.
Okay, Washer.
His message. It's funny, trying to remember what he spoke about concerning the sovereignty of God didn't stick with me as much as what happened, what I felt afterwards. Okay. It's like anytime Paul Washer speaks and he brings forth the majesty and the grace and the goodness of God, it makes you want to weep because of his great goodness to us. I go with that one.
Yeah, I'm going to plug my number two would be Owen Strachan.
Yeah.
Sure.
He was early in the conference, but I'm just going to put his name out there. And he brought out the work of God and God's love and several other points that he brought out from Ephesians 3. Yeah. So the moral of the story is, guys, check out Steve Lawson. We'll try to get him up on our Facebook page. Yeah. Vody Baukham's message, Owen Strachan, and then Packy just brought to our attention Paul Washer's message as well.
James Coates had a really helpful insight into the book of Ephesians when he preached through that. The idea that the church is what stuck with me when he described how it says in Ephesians that the church preaches the judgment even on angelic beings. When the church is being faithful to proclaim, I thought that was I never even noticed that in the text before, that the sign of God's sovereignty through the church.
Which, if you don't know who that is a Canadian preacher who 2 years ago was arrested in Canada for not abiding by Caesar's law, or what's Trudeau. The dictator? Trudeau's law that he needed to close down his church. Right. So he went to prison numerous times for being faithful to preaching the word and maintaining the Sunday service. Yeah. So he was there 2 years ago when we went. He was there this year. And so in the sermon that Packy was talking about, one of the things he brought out is bookends to a sermon that I thought was a very deep but yet concise statement. He said, we need to be willing to go to jail for going to church because Christ died for that.
Right.
And Coates explains in saying that Christ's death results in us as born-again believers having the opportunity and obligation to meet together in fellowship. Yeah. And so if Jesus died for that to happen, we should be willing to go to jail to maintain that system and order that Christ has established. And when he said at the beginning of the sermon, I was kind of like, okay, nice hyperbole, Coach. You're catching our attention early on.
Sure.
Clap for you. Yay. He preaches his sermon, he repeats it at the end, and I'm like, sold. That is so true. So true.
Yeah, and I think we're going to continue to enter into an environment that is going to be a reality for us again. Whether it's another pandemic or whatever else you want to call it. Even just the people who, and it just, I'm not into, well, maybe I am into conspiracy theories, but I'm not making this a conspiracy theory. I think it's very plausible that one of the people running for president is going to be Gavin Newsom, the guy who, him and John MacArthur went back and forth. God blessed MacArthur and Grace Community Church in that sense. Yeah. But that's a dude I think that would gladly shut down our country and our churches again. Yeah. If he was the big man. Yeah. And so.
Yeah, I appreciate how much in the conference, they were gearing us looking toward the future, what may be in the near future concerning these things, God's sovereignty, and all that's going to go on, no doubt, in the near future. What might happen? What might come up? They had they were going to show a documentary on they gave it away in the conference, The Essential Church. I would encourage you, if you get a chance to see that. It's coming out soon. I don't know if you can get it on DVD now. I know it's been in theaters. I took it home and watched the DVD, and it was very good on that issue. And so if you can't watch the G3 conference, see if you can find The Essential Church. Watch that documentary. It goes through what took place with MacArthur and Gavin Newsom, but also into church history and how others in church history said no to Caesar and yes to God in regard to those kinds of regulations.
Is that a summation or a describing of a summing up of what the Essential Church documentary is?
I would say so, yeah. It's not just MacArthur, but it includes James Coates, it includes Tim Stevens, what took place
There's another Canadian pastor that was arrested.
Yeah, another Canadian pastor. I think he was more in central Canada. He was arrested as well, and they show the video, and I wanted to cry watching it because as he's getting carted away in the police vehicle, his kids are crying while they're watching him go.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was you got to check that one out if you get a chance. It's a profound documentary.
Yeah. No. Awesome. Were there certain topics in regards to just the sovereignty of God that you guys would have liked to see covered that weren't? Like there was, Vodi Bakum was discussing God's sovereignty. Really, I think his message, he entitled it over marriage, but really it was God's sanctity in sexuality, or sovereignty in the sanctity of marriage and sexuality. He brought that up a lot. You have Lawson he kind of hammered a couple times just the general sovereignty of God over all things and is working through all things. Washer, I think, kind of hit sovereignty of God in missions almost. That kind of seems to be his repetitive thing.
Yeah.
Yep. And so was there anything that comes to mind that you're like, man, I wish we would have kind of heard that?
Not really. No.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there's probably something we could say that could have been covered, but I left very content, very satisfied with the topics that had been addressed.
Yeah.
And so no, it was good. And talking about Bauckham, something that I appreciate is he walked through Romans 1 and showed the kind of the downward spiral of human depravity. And before he got to the two verses that talk about homosexuality, he paused and said, we often as conservative Christians want to just run into these two verses in Romans 1 and address the LGBTQ mob. And he said, but we have to remember the verses that come right before it, which address just the general misunderstanding and misuse of human sexuality.
Right.
And he said that came long before the LGBTQ mafia came along. And he said it's in that we go several decades back in our history that we begin to see culture, media leading toward a desensitization, being desensitized to such things. And he said, but even in that, that's not the key problem to fixing the current problem in our sexual revolution in culture. But he talked about how those things, whether it's the desensitizing back in the 50s or it's the LGBTQ mob right now, that all of that is fruit sin. Yeah. And the root of the problem is a godless worldview.
Right.
And I appreciated that distinction there because, it's easy for us to do episodes on, as we've done before, on various forms of sexual immorality and promiscuity, etc. Or promiscuity. Promiscuity. There we go. Promiscuity.
Yeah.
But to remember that those are fruit issues, as important as they are, and there's a root to that, and we must have a God-centered worldview in all things.
I appreciate what you're saying because I just got done watching a video last night, and it was not a Christian video, and one of the things they were saying was how profoundly terrible it is that a Christian would tell a homosexual person that they're going to hell, and things like that, and we need to take a step back from that and also say all of us, right? It's not just those who would indulge in this sin. It's all of us, apart from Christ, are going to hell. And that's the heterosexual sinner as well as the homosexual sinner. So
I just told a man from my church last night that it's God's mercy that that you're headed toward hell. Because it would be mean of me to say that if it were a lie.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's a reality that an unforgiven sinner will go to hell, and that God in his mercy has revealed that truth ahead of time in Scripture is actually a great mercy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I praise God, this guy received that well. I don't know if he is converted, but he heard that and received it well. But it's not a harsh statement.
Right.
It's actually mercy that we know that ahead of time and we can run to Christ for forgiveness.
Isn't that interesting that so often people just don't perceive that what if what we're saying is true? It's not that I've made this up. It's that why would I tell you this if I didn't believe it was true? I'm not going to be liked for this message. I'm saying I believe this because it's true, not because and not because I want to make you mad at me or because I don't like you.
As I'm speaking, my stomach is in knots right now because I'm so nervous as I'm saying this to you about hell and these harsh things that I know you're going to hate me, you're not going to like me.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm really nervous right now. I'm shaking.
Right.
But because I love your soul, I'm willing to endure this to get the truth across to you. Yeah. So, sir, I love you. I care about you. I'm not trying to be a jerk.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I love it.
How did Bauckham tie that in again? He brought it back to Romans 1:16 and 17, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And then in verse 17 specifically, he mentioned that it really goes back to, for in it, that being the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous will live by faith. And then the immediate verse after, we go into what we've all known, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness. So yeah, was he making the tie back to, before we get into the mob and of sexuality that we're experiencing in our culture, that really it's just a fundamental unrighteousness that plagues our culture.
Yeah.
I think is that kind of what the tie he was making? I don't remember exactly.
I don't remember his exact words on that. It said, I mean, what you're saying sounds right, but I don't remember exactly how Bauckham tied that.
I could say I think that does make sense in the text, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like, again, because he starts very generally, and then he works his way into more increasingly wicked, increasingly sinful behaviors until the mind of society is completely gone, which is kind of where we're at when it comes to that. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I really appreciated just you bringing up, is it Strand?
Yeah, Owen Strand.
Owen Strand.
Yeah.
That's another thing I learned at the G3 conference. I learned how to pronounce this guy's name.
It looks like Strachan.
It looks like Strachan.
Strachan.
But he even said
Strauchan.
But he even said Strand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Owen Strand.
Yeah. All right.
Owen Strand, if you're listening to this right now, we would gladly take an email. You can correct us. We'll do an interview. We'd love to interview you. If you're listening to our podcast right now, we can interview you and you can correct us.
That would be great. I now that you bring me back to the notes I took on his message, I was very grateful for his bringing out God's sovereignty and his love for us. I wrote down what he said: "Do not let your awareness of sin dwarf the love of God in Christ. For the sinner, God is love." And it's always just such a wonderful reminder to me, because sometimes I often do let my sin dwarf the goodness of God in Christ, and I struggle with that. So, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, really take the time to listen to all the messages, because I'm going to try. I mean, I just drive around for work endlessly, looking out my windshield, and I'll probably try to listen to all of them again, because, I had the pleasure of meeting him at his booth, Owen. Owen's easier to say, so we'll just call him Owen. And he was super funny even then.
Yeah.
He's such a funny dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely had a sense of humor.
And and he even said to me there at his booth, there's a degree to which this is a serious conference and always has a serious kind of undergirding to it, which is fine and it should. But at the same time, too, I think I forget, and maybe many others do. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody else, but forget that there ought to be just a joy. Yeah. Like laughter is good.
It's okay to have fun.
Yeah. And so to bring that I appreciated that kind of spin that he brought on that, because he's kind of a funny guy.
Yeah.
There's guys that you listen to that you're like, man, I love listening to that guy. But maybe hanging out with them,
be better.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think he could go either way. Yeah. But he just seems like a guy that would be maybe really fun to just, I don't know, hang out with. I guess. Yeah.
One of the things I really, just by way of Easter egg, our listeners, if you get a chance to go on James White's Dividing Line and watch the one that he did on the 40 years. I think it starts with 40 years of ministry, something like that he recorded at the G3 conference. You can find us in there. Where all three of us are sitting there at front row. Yeah, James White's the guy he works with, Rich Pierce, did a panorama of the audience, and we're all the way on the right as he does that panorama. So
you threw a T-shirt.
I did. I threw a T-shirt. I was the one who threw the T-shirt. His wife, Kelly, told me to take the T-shirt and throw it. So
really?
Yeah. So I went and threw the T-shirt for him, and James White mentions that in the video. So
really?
Yeah, he does. So I actually watched.
If you listen carefully, you might hear Packy shouting, "Your wife told me to."
Yeah, she told me. Oh, okay. Kelly told me. Okay, that's what James.
You're forever on the dividing line.
I know. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, apart from calling in on open phones, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not. I'm actually. We're all three of us are present on the dividing line. I was able to watch that one and show my kids. Hey, look, boys, there we are.
Yeah.
Hey, there's Daddy. You know,
2 years ago when he did that, it was just at his little
Right.
booth. There wasn't like he didn't have this huge. I mean, for people listening in, he was in a decent sized chunk of the room, doing his episode live, and I always feel sorry for Rich. Mm-hmm. I just do.
Yeah, he's got a lot on his plate, right?
Well, I mean, he's just a lightning rod.
Yeah.
For a lot of the stuff that goes on with that podcast.
Yeah.
I'm an
he's the scapegoat.
Oh man,
he's the scapegoat.
Hey, listen, if any of the people that we listen to at the G3 ever listen to this episode, we love. I love every one of the pastors that gave a message, but there are just certain quirks that we think are funny. And James, you're just so hard on Rich, man. You're so hard.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And I noticed because there's another friend of his that was there that he started picking on as well.
Yeah.
I think he said something about him being a Brit or whatever. Yeah. It sounds like that's kind of, there's a part of James White's character, it seems like that's maybe part of his love language to kind of pick on somebody. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
I don't know.
Still needs sanctification. Like that for me is a part of like to use that terminology of love language. Yeah, I will. The way I usually put it is, if I love you, I pick on you. If not, I ignore you. And that's just putting it very bluntly. There's nuance to it, but that's kind of the general principle. But that doesn't mean it's right.
Sure.
So
James
that's
White.
kind of how I've come to see that. Hannah's been very good about gently pointing that out to me over these recent years. Yeah. But most of my life has kind of just been this dual role of either I'm ignoring you because I don't really care, or I'm poking fun at you because I love you.
Yeah.
James White, if he doesn't like you, he'll poke fun at you. If he likes you, he also pokes fun at you.
Well, one of the things I appreciated from that dividing line, this is not an exact quote, but he passed this on, and I was able to pass this on to somebody in my church. He says, God only gives grace when you need it and not before. He talked about an experience that somebody had gone through, and he brought that to him, and he says he's never forgotten that. And that fits in with the topic of God's sovereignty, right? I mean, like we expect and we hope that God would give us the grace to go through our trials immediately before, but go through them and watch God give you the grace you need to go through that. And maybe that would be a good way of application for our listeners. I thought that was a very helpful quote.
Yeah, that goes also with, so I was going to ask you guys, and you're kind of already going on that track, Packy, of just kind of what were the takeaways? Like we talked about some of our favorite parts and highlights from the conference itself, but then kind of thinking about, okay, what did we take away that maybe some work that God began to do in our lives at the conference and since then? And Packy, I appreciate that. And I would just kind of go along that same path, remembering the hymn. And the hymn is called God Moves in Mysterious Ways. It's by William Cooper. And probably one of the most quoted lyrics in that is, behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. Mm-hmm. And that, I'd heard that before here and there, but just as it was quoted a couple times from the stage, and I think we sang the song at one point. I could be wrong, but neither here nor there. But that just really kind of tattooed itself on my mind. And then this is where I'll kind of just plug a story from our experience there, where I kind of got a chance to, in a humorous way, experience this. Packy and I were headed to my car to leave the hotel to head for the conference, and we're climbing in, and Packy says, "Sean, you've got a busted window." I can't see it from where I'm standing. As I come around, and sure enough, passenger side window is just busted.
Yeah, in the back.
And you could tell it was not like an accident, but somebody was trying to punch it out, vandalize, etc. And so what I got to see for the rest of the day was just how, okay, there was something of a frowning providence. Not a situation I would have asked for. I would not have volunteered. I would come out right before the conference and find my window bashed in. But just the same, that was providence. And the way that the rest of the morning and the day worked out, I could see that smiling face behind it. And so in a way, I would say I appreciate it. It seems as though God gave me an opportunity while we're even there at the conference to appreciate that truth in a more personal way. And it all worked out. We got the window replaced, and that's not necessarily the smiling face of it. Sure. I'm just mentioning that we got that all squared away.
And even I got to see God's grace through Sean in the midst of it. There wasn't a wringing of hands or a a fear of is God going to work this out for good? It's like, well, no. In that instance, what I saw was God giving Sean grace to be able to work through all of that. We called the police. We did
It was only grace, because there's never been a time in my life where I've encountered a situation like that where I wasn't wringing my hands, I wasn't angry, I wasn't frustrated, I wasn't on edge. Yeah. If Hunter Ferguson is listening to this by any chance, you'll know exactly how I was when I tried to rent that car when we visited one time, and it was a financial catastrophe. Yeah. But
I think we were just blessed through it, and thankful that no one got injured. Yeah. No one had anything stolen. Right. I mean, we weren't missing anything that we know of. Right. We still don't. Have anything.
I didn't notice anything that was missing.
And I say all this, and very respectfully of the guy who lent his car for the trip and got the window smashed, and so I'm just thankful that nobody was hurt. So, but as far as just a takeaway, I think in the times where I felt the lowest or have struggled through seasons of life, maybe at the time I wouldn't have called it the doctrine of the sovereignty of God to be official. Yeah. But just how I've explained it to other people, and maybe how I would explain it to my children one day when they can understand and they go through highs and lows of life. When I read in Scripture how big and great God is, it puts me back in a secure place. Yeah. I love reading about, Psalm 93. We're going to close up the episode here real quick, and I'm going to share from Psalm 90. The Lord reigning and ruling over all things. Yeah. To think that God, who is the creator of all things, rules and reigns over my life for his glory, doesn't immediately take away the sting of a discomfort per se, but it brings me down on a pillow. Yeah. I did appreciate in kind of an unrelated note. I was very encouraged. I think it was White, or I don't remember which one it was, but somebody pointed out the fact that do I pray just big prayers or small prayers, or what do I? And the person giving the message was essentially like, well, God is so big, there's no big prayer. We should come to him as his children because he loves to hear from us regardless. Right. And so that was very comforting for me as well. And so I hope that anybody listening would take comfort in the greatness of God, the vastness of the Lord in sovereignly reigning over all things, and that he, being God, does listen to us. There's no doubt about it that the Psalms and other places teach that God hears our prayers. And I always do love when the psalmist is specific. He hears our lamenting, he hears our crying, he hears our struggling. And so
I wanted to mention one more thing here that I took away personally. If you're a person who's like me, or whose heart can be restless, and I think that's all of us in a sense, who it was rather more kind of emotional and so on, and sometimes your emotions can pull you in a direction that is uncontrollable perhaps, that you might think is uncontrollable. You need to do what Martin Lloyd-Jones says concerning the sovereignty of God. You need to preach to yourself the truth of God's sovereignty. I could be very easily prone to just start seeing the negative in all my circumstances, put myself in a place of fear. But reminding myself that what is true when my flesh is weak, when my emotions pull me to believe untruths and to believe the worst case scenario and to look no further than my current circumstances. It is the doctrine of the sovereignty of God that brings me hope, brings me comfort, gives me strength, and moves me to, in my current present circumstance, to rest in him.
All good thoughts. We're going to close with just selected verses from Psalm 90. I'm not going to take the time to read all 17 verses, but go back and read the Bible. But read Psalm 90 and Psalm 93. So selected verses out of Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place from generation to generation before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. Those are the first two verses. And then towards the end, O satisfy us in the morning with your loving kindness, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Let your work appear to your servants and your majesty to their sons. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish for us the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So we're thankful that from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. With that, we'll close another episode of Theologic. We really do appreciate you listening in. Do pay attention for further episodes and links being posted on social media so we can bless you with those. So with that, we'll close it out. And we again thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more.